Nobody expects it to happen. Not the bookmakers setting the odds months before the tournament begins, not the analysts filling television studios with predictions about the usual contenders, not the football traditionalists who have spent their entire lives watching the same handful of nations dominate the sport's biggest stage. And perhaps most importantly, not even some Americans themselves, because decades of disappointment have taught them a dangerous lesson. Hope is easy. Belief is much harder. Yet as the summer of 2026 unfolds beneath packed stadiums and endless waves of red, white and blue, something unusual begins to take shape. It starts quietly, almost invisibly, hidden beneath the noise of opening ceremonies and pre-tournament headlines. But with every passing day, the feeling grows stronger. The United States is still here. The United States keeps winning. And for the first time in modern football history, the possibility of a truly extraordinary World Cup run no longer feels like fantasy. This tournament was always supposed to be different. For years, American football supporters circled this date on calendars, imagining what it would feel like to host the world's greatest sporting event. Entire cities prepared for the moment. Stadiums were expanded. Fan zones were built. Billions of dollars were invested. Yet even among the excitement, a quiet assumption remained. Hosting the tournament was one thing. Winning it was something entirely different. Because football remembers history. It remembers Brazil lifting trophies beneath showers of confetti. It remembers Argentina producing icons capable of carrying entire nations on their shoulders. It remembers Germany's ruthless efficiency, France's endless production line of talent, Spain's golden generation, Italy's resilience. These nations belong to football's aristocracy. Their names are woven directly into the fabric of the World Cup itself. The United States is not, at least not yet. For decades, American football has existed in a strange position, too strong to be dismissed completely, yet never quite strong enough to join the sport's true elite. Every generation seemed to arrive carrying the same promise. Every tournament brought the same questions. Is this finally the team? Is this finally the moment? And almost every time, reality delivered the same answer. Not yet. The frustration became familiar. Talented players emerged only to fall short. Promising squads showed flashes of potential before running into more experienced opponents. Supporters were left celebrating respectable performances while watching other countries compete for trophies. Progress existed, but it always felt incomplete. Then something changed. Not overnight, not through a single player or a single match. The transformation happened gradually. American footballers began appearing at Europe's biggest clubs. Young talents developed inside elite academies. Expectations slowly evolved. Reaching the knockout stages was no longer enough. Competing was no longer enough. For the first time, a generation was emerging that genuinely believed it belonged among football's best. At the centre of that belief stands Christian Pulisic, not because he carries the entire team alone, but because he represents something larger than himself. For years, American football searched desperately for players capable of performing on the world's biggest stages. Now those players exist throughout the squad. Weston McKennie brings experience and intensity. Tyler Adams brings leadership. Folarin Balogun brings goals. Around them stands a roster built not on dreams, but on genuine quality. Even so, quality alone does not win World Cups. The tournament begins beneath impossible expectations. Everywhere the team travels, crowds follow. Every training session attracts cameras. Every interview becomes national news. Supporters fill airports, streets, hotels and stadiums. Millions of people who rarely watch football suddenly become emotionally invested. The World Cup has arrived on American soil, and with it comes a level of attention unlike anything the sport has previously experienced in the country. The opening match feels less like a football game and more like a national event. Hours before kickoff, supporters flood the surrounding streets. Flags hang from balconies, restaurants overflow. Giant screens dominate public squares. Children wear shirts bearing the names of players they have spent years idolizing. As kickoff approaches, the anticipation becomes almost unbearable. Then the players emerge from the tunnel. The noise is staggering. An ocean of red, white, and blue rises to its feet as fireworks illuminate the stadium roof. National anthems echo through the air. Cameras sweep across faces filled with hope, excitement, and fear. Because beneath all the celebration lies a simple truth. Hosting a World Cup creates memories. Winning one creates history. The opening minutes are tense. Every touch feels significant. Every misplaced pass triggers nervous reactions from the crowd. The weight of expectation hangs over the stadium like a storm cloud. Yet slowly, the Americans settle into the match. The nervous energy begins transforming into confidence. Attacks become sharper. Movements become quicker. The crowd senses it immediately. When the breakthrough finally arrives, the eruption can be heard far beyond the stadium walls. For a few seconds, the entire country seems united by a single emotion: relief. The victory is not perfect, it is not glamorous, but it is enough. More importantly, it provides momentum, and momentum is one of the most valuable currencies in tournament football. The group stage continues. Australia presents a different challenge. Turkey offers another. Each opponent brings unique dangers. Each match demands a different solution. Yet with every test, the United States grows stronger. Victories are earned rather than gifted. The players learn how to handle pressure. They learn how to manage expectations. Most importantly, they learn how to win. Outside the stadiums, something fascinating begins happening. The atmosphere surrounding the team changes. Supporters who initially hoped for a respectable tournament start discussing knockout rounds. Pundits who once dismissed American ambitions begin speaking more cautiously. Rival nations stop treating the United States as a curiosity and start treating it as a threat. The shift is subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Because confidence spreads, it moves through crowds, through media coverage, through dressing rooms, through entire countries. And once enough people begin believing, the energy surrounding a team becomes almost tangible. By the time the group stage reaches its conclusion, the United States no longer feels like a host nation enjoying a temporary moment in the spotlight. It feels like a contender building something dangerous. The players walk off the field after their final group match to a deafening ovation, fully aware that the hardest part of the journey still lies ahead. Because the knockout stage changes everything. The safety net disappears. Every match becomes a final. Every mistake becomes potentially fatal. Waiting beyond the group stage are the giants of world football, the nations whose histories are filled with trophies, legends, and unforgettable nights. The dream is alive. But now comes the part where dreams are usually destroyed, and somewhere beyond the lights, beyond the celebrations, beyond the growing belief of an entire country, football's greatest powers are waiting. The knockout stage strips away every illusion. The comfortable calculations of the group phase disappear, replaced by the ruthless simplicity that has defined every great World Cup in history. Survive and advance, or go home. It no longer matters how impressive a team looked in previous matches, how many goals it scored, or how confidently analysts discuss its chances. Everything comes down to 90 minutes. And sometimes even that is not enough. For the United States, the first knockout match represents far more than another game. It is a confrontation with history itself. For decades, American football has struggled to convince the world that it belongs among the sport's elite. Group stage victories earn attention. Knockout victories earn legitimacy. The difference is enormous, and every player understands it as they step onto the field beneath a wall of noise generated by tens of thousands of supporters who have begun believing something extraordinary might actually be possible. The opponent standing across from them possesses everything America still seeks: experience, tradition, the quiet confidence that comes from generations of success. Their supporters arrive expecting victory because that expectation has been built over decades. The Americans arrive carrying something different: hunger, urgency, the knowledge that opportunities like this do not appear often. The match immediately becomes a battle rather than a spectacle. Space disappears. Challenges become harder. Every possession feels contested. For long stretches, neither side can establish control, creating the kind of tension that spreads through an entire stadium and turns every attack into a potential turning point. The Americans defend aggressively, refusing to be intimidated by reputations. The crowd responds to every interception, every tackle, every blocked shot, as though the tournament itself depends on it. Then comes the moment every great World Cup story requires. Late in the second half, with tension reaching almost unbearable levels, a loose ball emerges near midfield. For a fraction of a second, the opposition loses its shape. Pulisic spots the opening immediately. One touch, then another. Suddenly, the entire stadium is rising to its feet as the attack accelerates. The move unfolds with the speed and clarity of something rehearsed 1,000 times, yet it feels completely spontaneous. A perfectly timed pass splits the defense. A runner arrives. A finish follows. The net ripples. For a brief instant there is silence, the kind that exists only when tens of thousands of people need a moment to process what they have just witnessed. Then the stadium erupts. Players sprint toward the corner flag. Supporters lose themselves completely. Across the country, bars, living rooms, public squares and watch parties explode into celebration. The final minutes feel endless. Every clearance is cheered. Every save feels monumental. The opposing team throws everything forward, desperate to rescue its tournament, but the Americans refuse to break. When the final whistle finally arrives, the reaction reveals how much the moment means. Players collapse to the grass, coaches embrace, supporters cry openly in the stands. The United States has reached the quarter-finals, and suddenly the conversation changes. The world is no longer asking whether America can compete. It is asking how far this run can go. The attention grows rapidly. International media begins dedicating entire segments to the team. Former players discuss its strengths. Rival nations start studying it more carefully. What began as an intriguing host nation story is transforming into something far more dangerous. The Americans are no longer playing with house money. They are becoming genuine contenders. Yet the quarterfinal presents an even greater challenge. The opponent waiting there is stronger, deeper, and more experienced than anyone the United States has faced so far. Its squad is filled with players accustomed to Champions League nights and title races. Its supporters expect to reach semi-finals. Its football culture treats pressure not as an obstacle, but as a requirement. For the first time in the tournament, America enters a match as the clear underdog. The opening half confirms every fear. The opposition controls possession. Chances become rare. The Americans spend long stretches defending deep inside their own half, while wave after wave of attacks crashes toward them. The crowd grows increasingly anxious. Commentators begin discussing whether the magical run is finally reaching its conclusion. But World Cups are often decided by people nobody expected. As the match enters its final stages, a new hero emerges. Not the superstar featured on posters, not the player receiving the most media attention. Someone else. A player whose name barely appeared in pre-tournament predictions, yet who suddenly finds himself standing at the centre of the biggest moment of his career. Perhaps it is a goalkeeper producing impossible saves. Perhaps it is a defender making a goal line clearance. Perhaps it is a substitute who enters late and changes everything. The details almost become secondary to the emotion of the moment itself. What matters is that America survives. Again. When the decisive goal finally arrives, it feels less like a football moment and more like destiny intervening. The stadium detonates. Players race toward each other in disbelief. Supporters stare at the field with expressions that alternate between joy and astonishment. Even neutral observers begin sensing that they are witnessing something larger than an ordinary tournament run. The final whistle confirms it. The United States is going to the World Cup semi-finals. For a country that spent decades discussing football's future, the future has suddenly become the present. The reaction extends far beyond sport. Major landmarks are illuminated in national colours. News channels abandon regular programming. Social media becomes consumed by a single topic. Children wear jerseys to school. Offices organise viewing parties. Entire cities begin preparing for what comes next. Because now, the dream feels close enough to touch. And that is precisely when it becomes most dangerous. Until this point, the Americans have enjoyed a certain freedom. Expectations were limited. Every victory felt like a bonus. Every achievement exceeded predictions. But reaching the Final Four changes the psychological landscape completely. The pressure multiplies. The possibility becomes visible. The trophy no longer feels distant. It feels attainable. Standing between the United States and the World Cup final is one of football's true giants, a nation whose history is decorated with legendary players, unforgettable victories, and generations of excellence. Unlike previous opponents, this team knows exactly how to navigate moments like these. It understands the pressure. It embraces the spotlight. It expects to be here. The semi-final is no longer a surprise opportunity. It is a collision between football's established order and a nation trying to rewrite it. And as supporters flood toward the stadium on the morning of the match, carrying flags, scarves, and dreams that have grown larger with every passing victory, one realization begins spreading through the crowd. The impossible mission is no longer impossible. It is now only 2 matches away. The semi-final arrives carrying a weight unlike anything American football has ever experienced. What began weeks earlier as a hopeful tournament run has evolved into a national obsession. Across the country, giant screens fill public squares. Stadiums hosting unrelated events pause to show updates. Restaurants, airports, schools, and office buildings all seem connected by a single question. Can they really do this? The opponent waiting on the other side of the pitch represents everything football history says should happen next. A giant of the game, a nation whose players grew up expecting nights like these, whose supporters measure success not by participation but by trophies, and whose jersey alone carries enough history to intimidate most opponents before kickoff. On paper, the story should end here. But tournaments are not played on paper. They are played beneath floodlights, inside roaring stadiums, and under pressure so intense it reveals things statistics can never measure. The opening minutes are relentless. Every challenge arrives with force. Every attack carries danger. The pace is faster than anything America has experienced so far. Yet something remarkable becomes apparent almost immediately. The Americans are no longer impressed by famous opponents. The nervous admiration that once accompanied matches against football royalty has disappeared. This team has spent weeks surviving impossible situations, and somewhere along the way it stopped seeing itself as an outsider. As the match progresses, the balance begins shifting. The giant grows frustrated. America grows bolder. Midfield battles are won. Counterattacks become sharper. Confidence spreads through the team with every successful pass. The crowd senses it before anyone else. The noise changes. Hope becomes expectation. Then comes another defining moment. A quick transition catches the opposition out of position. Pulisic drifts into space. Balogun makes a run that pulls defenders away. The opening lasts less than a second, but at this level, a second is enough. The ball arrives perfectly. A shot follows. The stadium erupts. For the next 30 minutes, the United States defends with a level of determination that borders on desperation. Players throw themselves in front of shots. Midfielders cover impossible distances. The goalkeeper produces the performance of his life. Every minute feels longer than the one before. When the final whistle finally sounds, reality struggles to catch up with the moment. The United States has reached the World Cup final. Not the quarterfinals, not the semi-finals, the final. Players collapse to the grass in disbelief. Some laugh uncontrollably, others cry. Supporters in the stands embrace complete strangers. Across the country, celebrations spill into the streets. For one extraordinary night, an entire nation forgets everything except the fact that its football team is now one victory away from immortality. And that is when the pressure truly begins. Because reaching the final creates a new challenge. Before, the dream felt distant enough to enjoy. Now it stands directly in front of them. The World Cup trophy appears in every broadcast, every newspaper, every conversation. It sits beneath spotlights, shining like an object from another world, reminding everyone how close the Americans have come and how much remains at stake. The days before the final pass slowly. Training sessions become global news. Every player interview is analysed. Every tactical decision becomes a headline. The football world stops discussing whether America belongs and begins discussing whether America can finish the story. Meanwhile, the final opponent waits. Another giant, another champion, another nation carrying generations of football tradition. Unlike the Americans, they have been here before. They understand the pressure. They understand the expectations. They understand exactly what it takes to survive a World Cup final. The United States does not, at least not yet. Kickoff arrives beneath an atmosphere so intense it feels almost unreal. The stadium glows beneath the lights, flags ripple through the crowd. Billions watch around the world. Every camera focuses on the same patch of grass. Every player understands that moments like this define careers, define generations, and sometimes define entire nations. The match unfolds exactly as a World Cup final should. Neither side wants to make the first mistake. Every attack is met by resistance. Every chance feels enormous. Minutes disappear while tension continues building. The score remains close. The margins remain microscopic. Somewhere between fear and belief, the game drifts deeper into uncertainty. As the second half progresses, fatigue begins creating opportunities. Spaces appear where none existed before. Defenders react a fraction slower. Midfield battles become more chaotic. The match feels balanced on a knife's edge, waiting for somebody to seize control of history. And that is what makes the moment so powerful. Not certainty, possibility. Because for decades, American football existed in the future tense. It was always about what the country might become, what potential it possessed, what could happen someday if everything finally came together. Yet standing beneath those lights, competing with the world's best team for the sport's greatest prize, the future suddenly becomes irrelevant. The opportunity exists now. The dream exists now. The possibility exists now. Whether the final whistle ultimately delivers triumph or heartbreak almost ceases to matter in that moment. What matters is that the United States has already changed the conversation forever. It has forced the football world to look at it differently. It has inspired millions of young players. It has proven that the distance between ambition and achievement is not as great as people once believed. The trophy remains only 90 minutes away. Perhaps less. Perhaps more. Nobody knows how the story ends. But as the match enters its final moments and the stadium rises to its feet, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. For the first time in history, the dream no longer belongs only to supporters, pundits, or hopeful predictions. It belongs to the players standing on that field. And somewhere beneath the noise, beneath the pressure, beneath the weight of football history itself, a possibility remains alive. Maybe the sleeping giant has finally awakened. Maybe the impossible was simply waiting for the right generation. And maybe, just maybe, the world is watching the moment American football changes forever.